Do this right now. If you are currently sitting in a chair, do not stand up. Do not change your posture. Stay exactly where you are. Look at the clock on your wall or the time on your screen. I want you to calculate exactly how many hours you have been sitting in that exact physical position today. Count the time you spent sitting at the kitchen table eating breakfast. Count the time you spent sitting in your car commuting to work. Count the hours you have been sitting at that desk staring at the screen. Count the time you plan to spend sitting on the couch tonight. Add up the hours. Now look down at your legs. Do not move them, just look at them. Pay absolute, hyper-focused attention to exactly what is happening inside your lower body right now. Feel the dense, dull heaviness in your calves. Notice the slight coldness in your feet and your toes. Notice how your breathing is incredibly shallow, utilizing barely 10 or 15% of your actual lung capacity. But most importantly, notice the complete, total, absolute absence of tension in the massive muscles of your body. Your glutes, the largest, most powerful muscles you possess, are entirely turned off. They are flattened against the cushion, neurologically offline. Your quadriceps are entirely dormant. Your hamstrings are shortened, tight, and inactive. You feel comfortable. You feel like you are resting. But biologically, inside your circulatory system, you are suffocating. You think this is perfectly fine. You think sitting in a chair for 10 hours a day is harmless because you woke up at 6:00 a.m. and went to the gym. You think because you ran on a treadmill for 45 minutes, or you took a high-intensity spin class, or you lifted weights and sweated through your shirt, that you bought yourself cardiovascular immunity for the rest of the day. You think you can out-train a sedentary lifestyle. You think a single burst of exercise acts as a biological eraser for 10 hours of complete physical stagnation. You are completely, catastrophically wrong. Your 45-minute morning workout did not save your arteries. Because the clogging of your heart, the hardening of your vascular system, and the acceleration of your biological aging is not determined by how hard you exercise for 1 hour. It is determined by the fluid dynamics of your blood during the other 15 hours when you are not exercising. And right now, across 4 distinct, undeniable layers of fluid physics, molecular endocrinology, and anthropological cardiology, I am going to show you exactly why your ergonomic office chair is destroying your heart faster than your gym can save it. Phase 4, Science Layer 1, Fluid Dynamics and Shear Stress. Layer 1 is the absolute, brutal physics of fluid dynamics. You have been taught to think of your arteries as static, inanimate plumbing. You think plaque builds up in your arteries the same way grease builds up in the drain pipe under your kitchen sink. You think if you just eat less cholesterol, the pipe stays clean. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of human anatomy. Your arteries are living, highly muscular, intensely dynamic tubes, and the absolute most critical part of this tube is the inner lining, a microscopic layer exactly 1 cell thick called the endothelium. When blood flows through your arteries, it physically drags against this cellular wall. In fluid physics, this mechanical friction is called shear stress. When you are walking, packing, or moving consistently, your heart pumps a high, steady volume of blood. This fast-moving blood creates high, continuous shear stress against the endothelium. And this is where the miracle of human biomechanics occurs. The endothelial cells are highly sensitive to this physical friction. When they feel the shear stress dragging across them, it acts as a mechanical trigger. The friction commands the endothelium to synthesize and release massive amounts of a gas called nitric oxide. No. Nitric oxide is the ultimate cardiovascular armor. It forces the blood vessels to relax and expand, lowering your blood pressure. But more importantly, nitric oxide makes the artery wall slick, perfectly smooth, and highly anti-inflammatory. When shear stress is high, nitric oxide is high. Your arteries literally turn into biological Teflon. Nothing can stick to them. But look at what happens when you sit in a chair for 6, 8, or 10 hours a day. Because the massive muscles in your legs are completely offline, they are not acting as secondary pumps to push the blood back up to your heart. Gravity takes over. The blood literally pools in your lower extremities. The overall flow rate of your circulatory system plummets. Because the blood is moving so slowly, the physical friction against the artery wall disappears. The shear stress drops to near zero. When the shear stress stops, the endothelium panics. It immediately stops producing nitric oxide. The biological Teflon wears off, but it gets worse. Without the mechanical friction of moving blood, the endothelial cells actually physically change shape. They become highly permeable. They begin to express adhesion molecules on their surface. They become intensely inflammatory. The artery wall goes from Teflon to Velcro. This is the exact, specific moment when oxidized LDL cholesterol, circulating triglycerides, and immune cells called macrophages begin snagging on the adhesion molecules and embedding themselves deep into the arterial wall. This is the genesis of atherosclerosis. You do not clog your arteries while you are eating a cheeseburger. You clog your arteries while you are sitting motionless at a desk answering emails for 4 consecutive hours, dropping your shear stress to zero, and turning your blood vessels into inflammatory Velcro. To understand how wildly, violently far we have deviated from the biological design of the human cardiovascular system, you have to look outside the modern Western world. Look deep into the Bolivian Amazon, at an indigenous population called the Tsimane tribe. In 2017, a massive team of anthropologists and cardiologists published a landmark study in the Lancet Asterisk. They traveled to the Amazon, located the Tsimane, and put hundreds of them through advanced CT scans to measure their coronary artery calcium scores, the absolute gold standard for measuring plaque buildup in the heart. The results shocked the global medical community. The Tsimane have the absolute lowest rates of coronary atherosclerosis ever recorded in human history. A typical 80-year-old Tsimane man has the vascular age of a 55-year-old American. Their arteries are spotless. Why? They do not go to a gym. They do not own treadmills. They do not do 45 minutes of high-intensity interval cardio and then drink a protein shake. They do not exercise for the sake of exercising. They engage in continuous, relentless, low-level physical movement. They walk, they forage, they squat, they carry wood, they hunt. They engage in low to moderate physical activity for 6 to 8 hours every single day. They almost never sit completely still in a chair for more than a few minutes at a time. Because they never stop moving, their blood never pools. Their shear stress never drops to zero. Their endothelium is constantly, relentlessly bathed in the friction that produces nitric oxide. Their arteries remain coated in biological Teflon from the day they are born until the day they die. Now look at the profound, devastating arrogance of modern culture. We invented the ergonomic office chair. We invented the couch. We invented the automobile. We completely and totally segregated physical movement from our daily existence. And then, to fix the catastrophic health problems this caused, we invented the modern commercial gym. We built a society where it is considered perfectly normal and healthy to sit in a highly engineered, padded chair for 10 hours a day, effectively putting a tourniquet on our entire vascular system, shutting down our shear stress, and letting our blood pool in our legs. And then we drive to a gym. We step onto a treadmill for 45 minutes, violently blast our heart rate to 160 beats per minute, sweat profusely, and believe that this concentrated burst of artificial suffering acts as a biological eraser for the 10 hours of stagnation. It does not work. The math does not add up. You cannot put a tourniquet on your vascular system for 10 hours, turn your arteries into inflammatory Velcro, allow the oxidized lipids to embed themselves into your endothelium, and then expect a 45-minute spin class to magically scrub the plaque away. We built a society that actively castrates our circulation for 90% of our waking hours, and we pathetically try to buy it back with a $50 a month gym membership. The modern gym mentality is a band-aid applied to a severed artery. But the lack of shear stress is only the macro-level physics. Layer 3 is what happens on a microscopic, molecular level when you sit still. Inside the capillary beds of your muscle tissue, specifically in your legs, there is a miraculous, life-saving enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, LPL. LPL is the biological vacuum cleaner of your bloodstream. Its entire evolutionary job is to latch onto the triglycerides, fat molecules, circulating in your blood, pull them out of the circulation, and feed them into your muscle cells to be burned as fuel. But LPL has a massive biological catch. It is highly, exquisitely sensitive to muscular contraction. It requires constant, continuous, low-level muscle firing to stay active. When you are standing, when you are packing on the phone, when you are simply fidgeting or shifting your weight from one leg to the other, the massive muscles in your legs are constantly firing. This low-level contraction keeps the LPL enzyme turned up to maximum capacity, violently vacuuming the fat out of your blood and keeping your triglyceride levels incredibly low. But the moment you sit down in a chair, the muscles go offline. Within minutes of sitting completely still, the LPL activity in your legs plummets by up to 90%. The biological vacuum cleaner is literally unplugged from the wall. Because the LPL shuts down, the fat stays in your blood. The triglycerides circulate for hours. They oxidize. They become highly toxic. And because your shear stress is at zero and your artery walls have turned to Velcro, that highly toxic, unvacuumed fat gets caught in the endothelium and begins building plaque. You are not clogging your arteries because you ate an egg. You are clogging your arteries because you unplugged the biological vacuum cleaner that was designed to clear the fat from your blood. Layer 4 is the metabolic fire. It is a concept known in exercise physiology as NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. NEAT is the energy expended for everything you do that is not sleeping, eating, or sports-like exercise. It is the energy you burn walking to the store, typing, performing yard work, packing the room, and shivering. In the ancient human, and in the modern Tsimane tribe, NEAT accounts for a massive, overwhelming percentage of their daily caloric expenditure. They do not do workouts. They just never stop burning the slow, steady metabolic fire of continuous movement. In the modern office worker, NEAT is almost non-existent. We have optimized all the movement out of our lives. We have robotic vacuums. We have food delivery apps. We have remote controls and power windows. When you eliminate NEAT, you don't just burn fewer calories. You fundamentally alter your metabolic profile. Your insulin sensitivity drops. Your blood sugar stays elevated longer. Your systemic inflammation rises. A 45-minute gym session burns roughly 300 to 500 calories. But maximizing your NEAT, simply choosing to stand, pace, and engage in continuous low-level movement throughout the entire 16-hour waking day, can burn upwards of 1,000 to 2,000 additional calories, while keeping your LPL vacuum running and your shear stress perfectly optimal. The continuous, slow-burning fire of NEAT prevents the metabolic stagnation of aging. The intense, 45-minute gym session followed by 15 hours of sitting simply cannot compete with the sheer biological volume of moving all day long. We must calibrate the science. I want you to know exactly how firmly established these mechanisms are in the medical literature, so you understand this is not just an anti-sitting trend. The role of endothelial shear stress as the mechanical trigger for nitric oxide production, and the subsequent atheroprotective effect that prevents plaque formation, is the absolute bedrock of modern cardiovascular biomechanics and hemodynamics. The suppression of the lipoprotein lipase, LPL, enzyme due to prolonged muscular inactivity, and the devastating effect this has on circulating triglycerides, is heavily documented and peer-reviewed in the field of sedentary physiology. The concept of non-exercise activity thermogenesis, NEAT, and its massive impact on overall metabolic health was pioneered by Dr. James Levine at the Mayo Clinic, fundamentally shifting how endocrinologists view weight management and metabolic syndrome. And the anthropological data regarding the Tsimane tribe, proving their near-zero rates of atherosclerosis through continuous, low-level movement, was published in the Lancet Asterisk, representing the gold standard of cross-cultural cardiology. The fluid dynamics are real, the enzymology is real, the anthropological precedent is absolute. Now stand perfectly still and recognize the sheer magnitude of the biological machinery you have been shutting down every single day. And exactly what happens when you turn it back on. Think about the blood pooling in your legs. Think about the shear stress dropping to zero. Think about the nitric oxide vanishing, the arteries turning to Velcro, and the LPL vacuum cleaner completely shutting off while the oxidized fat circulates in your blood. Imagine what happens tomorrow when you change the protocol. You do not just go to the gym for 45 minutes and then sit for the rest of the day. You fundamentally change the architecture of your environment. You get a standing desk. You pace the room every time you take a phone call. You park a mile away from the entrance. You squat down to pick things up instead of bending over. You engage in continuous, relentless, low-level movement from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to sleep. The massive muscles in your legs constantly fire. The LPL vacuum cleaner runs at maximum capacity, violently clearing the triglycerides from your bloodstream before they can oxidize. The continuous volume of blood forces intense mechanical shear stress against the walls of your arteries. The endothelium responds by pumping out massive quantities of nitric oxide. The blood vessels expand. The inflammation is crushed. The arterial walls become slick, biologically impenetrable Teflon. The plaque cannot stick. The fat is burned for fuel. The metabolic fire rages continuously. 3 profound, intense, life-saving biological mechanisms running perfectly, simultaneously, cascading into one another to rebuild the resilience, the stability, and the vascular integrity of the human machine. And all it requires is for you to stop accepting the lethal, stagnant comfort of a padded chair. Look at the chair you are sitting in. Look at the ergonomic padding. Look at the armrests. Look at the exact, comfortable position that has been holding your vascular system hostage for the last 20 years. Stand up. Do not rely on your morning workout to save your heart. Do not rely on a 45-minute burst of suffering to undo 10 hours of biological stagnation. Stop segregating your movement. Stop trying to schedule your health into a tiny, artificial window in the morning. Build an environment that demands continuous motion. Pace the room, stand up, walk, squat, fidget. Maintain the shear stress. Keep the LPL vacuum running. Armor your arteries with nitric oxide. Stop sitting like a modern victim. Move like an ancient human.